Welcome to Public Safety Talk Radio, the podcast for all of our heroes in public safety, including law enforcement professionals, firefighters, EMTs, corrections officers, healthcare workers, and more. The show is produced by the POCUA and is founded upon its Soundness Initiative. This episode is sponsored by OfficerPrivacy.com. Are you ready to delete your information from the internet to keep you and your family safe? Then go to OfficerPrivacy.com/POCUA for a special offer today. I am Ken Bader, your host for Public Safety Talk Radio, and I have a very intriguing guest today. Let me tell you a little bit about him. His name is Pete James, not James Pete James. I know he's got two first names going there, but we'll let that slide. He is a retired law enforcement officer, so we thank him for his service right then and there. And he has a passion for the safety and security of those in the profession. That's why he started OfficerPrivacy.com, which we're obviously going to talk about. It offers a full range of privacy services that removes clients' personal information from the internet so they and their family can feel safe and secure in their home. And don't we all need that? Pete, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Ken. I appreciate being on your show. It's good to be here.
My pleasure. Well, let's first talk about your law enforcement career. Because I understand you were in computer forensics for the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department. What was that like? Was that some kind of fancy CSI thing, or were you just sitting there looking through data all day?
Yeah, toward the end of my career, I focused on computer forensics. Overall, yeah, I did 25 years with the Sheriff's Department. I spent about a third of my time working in our jails, a third in patrol, and a third in investigations. I did end up promoting a couple times, so I did leave as a lieutenant. But toward the tail end of my career, I started doing digital forensics, mostly because there was a need for it. And we did have the task force. We had the ICAC task force and the high-tech task force, and they would formally be responsible for handling those cases. But their backlog was such that there was a need for it. And so I started learning and ended up working those cases quite a bit.
Sure. Is that kind of how you started off in law enforcement, to do that computer forensic job, or were you an officer in full uniform in a car, or did it start out some other way?
Yeah, so I before law enforcement, I spent a few years living on an aircraft carrier.
Oh, nice.
I was on the, I was on the USS John F. Kennedy, which was based out of Norfolk, Virginia, and did a few years there. Left, went to school, and had a couple odd jobs here and there, and started my law enforcement career. So yeah, I worked, as you know, sheriff's departments, they have the jails. So you start in the jail, rotate out to patrol. And like I said, I spent about a third of my career in working the jails, a third working patrol, and then a third working investigations. It was when I was working investigations where I saw the need for digital forensics work, and that's when I picked that up.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago. I've never been a police officer or first responder, but obviously have a ton of respect for everybody in those professions. But I was surprised to learn, and I think it was just a year ago, that everybody in the sheriff's department, I think in the state of California, starts out working in the prison system. Did I get that right? Is that correct?
So, there are 58 counties in California. Some agencies have dedicated correctional officers within their sheriff's departments.
Right.
Others, you rotate through. You generally start at the jails, and then when you're eligible, you transfer out to patrol. With us, because we had the jail, and that's how it was set up for us, every single time you promote, you end up going back to the jails. So that's why I ended up going back to working the jails a few times. But then from there, you end up rotating out to patrol.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, I could definitely dig more into that, but I, I want to learn a little bit more about officerprivacy.com, especially because, here in 2021, I think it's such a necessary service for our law enforcement professionals and their families. But when it comes to that particular business, did your work in computer forensics kind of lead you to starting that business, or was there another motivation?
So after I left law enforcement and I retired at the end of 2013, I worked for several years in computer forensics as a consultant. So I worked for a couple e-discovery companies and a large corporation doing online investigations and digital forensics cases. And these were all civil cases. None were criminal defense. They were all civil cases, mostly intellectual property theft and inappropriate conduct on
Hmm.
with their digital devices. So those types of investigations. So I was doing online investigations, and I was using the sites that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But I was
Sure.
using these sites on a regular basis to do research, and I always knew these sites existed, and I always knew that you could go in there and take the information off. But I really felt like, okay, it's overwhelming. It's just there are so many sites. There's nothing you can do. You're going to get put back on the sites, and what good is it, right? You're just chasing your tail. And the bottom line is that's not the case. There is something you can do about it, and it just takes it takes diligence yourself doing
Sure.
it, or you end up hiring us, and then we take care of it for you. But yeah, these sites that I'm talking about, I refer to them as people search sites,
Mm.
and you've probably heard of them: White
Yeah.
Pages, Spokio, Intellius Rodaris, been verified. These sites, and the danger to officers is that these sites list your home address, your date of birth, your email address, your phone number, the names of your relatives. Now, maybe for the average everyday person, it's okay that that information is there, or maybe they don't care.
Hmm.
But for officers, it's a huge problem, because an officer is involved in an incident, or maybe if they're not involved in an incident, maybe if they just arrest someone who is unhappy that they're getting arrested, next thing you know is they're getting on the internet and they're researching you, and they're finding out where you live.
Now, a word from the POCUA. The POCUA can suggest a credit union that serves public safety professionals in practically every state in the country. While we can suggest a number of local and regional institutions that serve first responders, when a police officer resides in a state without a POCUA member organization, we are proud to refer him or her to the National Police Credit Union. The National Police Credit Union was born out of a desire to serve those who serve and protect. As a division of Chicago Patrolmen's Federal Credit Union, the National Police Credit Union builds upon over 80 years of expertise in the financial services industry. The National Police Credit Union's goal is to bring police credit union access to every officer who currently does not enjoy the benefits that access brings them. For information about the National Police Credit Union, go to nationalpolicecu.com or call 844 COP SAVE. To find a POCUA credit union nearest you, go to policecreditunions.com. And always remember, if you aren't banking with a POCUA credit union, you're just working with an institution that just so happens to serve public safety professionals, and you deserve better. All right, we're back for those folks in the audience, whether especially those that are watching the video version. Yeah, this is the fun part of doing these shows because we had a major Wi-Fi problem last Friday afternoon. So if you see the lighting a little bit different, or the fact that I'm no longer drinking water and I'm drinking Blue Line Roasting Company, which is a damn good coffee, by the way, is because it's now Monday morning. It's one of those things that you just roll with. So thanks for coming back, Pete.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me again.
Where we left off is we were talking about officer privacy, And you were talking about the fact that there are a lot of these sites out there that can find your information. In fact, exactly where you left it off is you were talking about somebody could go to a site and find a law enforcement spouse's name and address and things of that nature. So why don't you pick it up there? Because that's very serious.
Sure. Well, these sites, they expose your information, your home address, your email address, your phone number, the names of your relatives. And let's say, they don't want to go after the officer. Now, the biggest risk, taking a step back, the biggest risk is that these people show up at your front door and they harm you or your family.
Right.
But even in addition to that, let's say they just want to make your life miserable. Let's say they just want to be a thorn in your side.
Which they
Well,
can
one way
do.
to do it,
Yeah.
one way to do it, identify your spouse. And let's say they don't go to the extreme and harm your spouse. Let's say they figure out where she works because she's on social media. And let's say they make some baseless complaint against your spouse. Let's say your spouse has an online store that's reliant on reviews. They'll get together and say, post bad reviews about this spouse's business. So, there are many different ways that you can be harassed. It's not always the direct, I'm going to show up at your front door, I'm going to throw a Molotov cocktail through your front window, or I'm going to show up at your kid's school. It's indirect as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you point that out. Yeah, I often mention I cover true crime for Podcast Magazine, and one really top-notch podcast is a show called Strictly Stalking, which goes a little bit deeper than entertainment. It's also very educational for somebody unfortunate to actually have been stalked or are being stalked now. And it's interesting, the level of stress and just you know, irritation. Yeah, I'm not even using the right words. Is off the charts on what some of these folks will do to just screw up your entire life on so many levels, whether it be online or in person or what have you, without even touching you.
Certainly. And I always recommend that you do a vulnerability assessment on yourself. You figure out what you can find out about yourself online. Check, start with a Google search and then check social media sites. Are your accounts open or are they closed? The friends that you have, if it is closed and somebody wants to join your network, are you really sure that that person is who you think it is? And just because they have other law enforcement friends doesn't mean they're really who they are. I mean,
Yeah.
these people are smart. They're going to create fake profiles. They're going to, post that they support law enforcement and make posts like this, but it doesn't really mean that that's who they are. They're crafty. They're smart. They're evil, and you got to be careful. And not to be paranoid. You don't want to live your life as a paranoid wreck, but you just got to be careful and
Yeah.
expect that they are crafty and they will use methods, to get inside your head and to get inside your social network. And then to
Yeah.
get you to share your opinions, which you think are maybe, just between you and that person. Turns out they're not.
Mhm.
Then you end up in court or on the front page of the newspaper with something you said maybe years prior. And that happens all the time.
Yeah, these folks may be evil and crazy, but they're definitely not stupid. Yeah, it also kind of reminds me as you were speaking, especially from a law enforcement professional standpoint, something that I definitely learned from my police friends is just a basic necessity to be aware. You don't necessarily need to be paranoid, but be aware of your surroundings. And I have friends that are not in law enforcement that that tell me that I've been around my cop friends too much because I observe things that other people just don't see. The person on the corner that's kind of looking at us and talking to a couple other guys, or somebody that walks into a restaurant or bar, or somebody even a block away that it just doesn't seem right. And I'm not paranoid about it, but I very well may just cross the street and avoid it.
Sure, sure. It's that sixth sense that you have in the back of your head. You may not be able to fully process it in the front part of your brain, but it's definitely there, and it's helping you. I would recommend that if you've had social media for a while, and if you post a lot, or even if you don't post a lot, might want to be a good time to go through your old posts and just make sure that there's nothing inflammatory out there. Uh, when an incident happens, and likely now even before an incident, just as background, uh, these people, these groups, these organizations, they're going through officers' sites, and they are looking, and they're downloading it. They may never use it, but they're downloading as much as they can. Fast forward a week, a month, a year, 2 years, 5 years. If you're involved in an incident, or let's say you're just on camera speaking about an event, and what you have said will be taken out of context, they're going to bring up these old tweets, these old posts, and they're going to use them to harm you. They're going to use them to make you look bad. They're going to take them out of context, and it's going to go viral. So, not only think about your posts from today forward, but think about your old posts. The headlines are, we'll see headlines that'll talk about, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, this, editor of this magazine posted a tweet, or went to a certain party, and then it just gets blown up. So, and then the editor loses their job, as well as anybody who dared support them. So think about what you're posting, and go back to your old posts and review those, and make sure those would be okay. Those would be seen okay today. Again, it's do what you can to prevent any future problems.
Yeah, that's a great point. I can remember things, even, to a certain extent, to anybody listening, not necessarily in law enforcement or as a first responder. There are things that, you believed 5, 6, 7 years ago that seem, very sane. And then other times, 3 or 4 years later, you're thinking, things have changed. I wasn't quite right, in my thinking, and I've changed my thinking, which, in the United States, you're certainly able to change your thinking. That's a right. That you might want to, take some of that stuff off. So that's great advice. Let's dig in a little bit more into the business of officerprivacy.com. I'm interested in hearing where most of your business comes from. For instance, is it a particular region? Is it a particular state? Or is it possibly, and I've seen this as well, are the requests coming directly from the law enforcement professional, or possibly that professional spouse? Because I know in a number of cases, is kind of a little bit tongue-in-cheek, I've talked to many police wives out there, and they will say, yeah, my husband's out there, having fun catching bad guys, and I'm raising 4 kids and taking care of the finances and everything. It's me that cares about the privacy more than my husband, the officer, just as an example. So where are you getting most of your business? Where's that coming from?
Yeah, Ken, definitely. We do get a lot of accounts from the spouses of the wives, because they are at home. And so first, officerprivacy.com, what we do is we remove our clients information from the top 30 people search sites that show their home address and their email address and their phone number. So our staff, we are all former or current law enforcement officers, all based here in the US. And we will go through the sites and we will remove their information. And once their information is removed, we will monitor those sites. And when their information comes back up again, repopulates on those sites, we remove them again. We have thousands of clients in all 50 states. In looking at the data, the majority of our clients are from the highest population states, but they're all 50 states. Half of our clients are not law enforcement officers. Even though my focus is our officers, half of my clients are not. They're attorneys, they're realtors, they're people who have been victims of
Bookies.
stalking
Yeah.
and harassment. They're all.
Sorry, I had to toss that in there just for some comic relief, but continue, Pete.
Sure. So yeah, we have a lot of the times it is the spouse or the girlfriend of the husband, because they're back at home, or they're on social media sometimes more than the officer, and they see all the garbage that's going around and all the hate that's going around, and so they are the ones that take the steps to sign up their spouse.
Yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought about the stalking aspect until I brought it up earlier on our discussion, and you mentioned it. But yes, I could see how how your service would be a very, very valuable and almost protective service of anybody that's a victim of stalking out there.
Sure, and there's also the identity theft side of it. So these sites, they show our full name, including our middle name, our home address, our email address, and phone numbers, and the name of relatives. So let's say they have our email address, and we don't think of protecting our email address because we hand it out to everyone. But if you think about it, in many of our online accounts, our email account is half of what somebody needs to log into that account, right?
Yep.
It's the username. The other half is our password. And you've heard about all these data breaches, right? All these companies are constantly getting breached, and then the data from these companies is being downloaded and analyzed. And what they're seeing with these data breaches are the passwords of accounts. So you have the username, an email account, and then you have a password. So somebody goes to the site, they find an officer's email address, their private email addresses. They collect the data, they get the data, review the data. There are sites online where you can review that data. And now they have some potential passwords. They use those potential passwords with the username, and there are programs where you can hit hundreds and thousands of sites all at one time with potential username and passwords, and you hope to get lucky and log into their accounts. So now somebody has access to your account. Now, some of these breaches, sometimes they have passwords, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you can see them in English. Sometimes it's not. It's converted to a hash, which means you have to convert it back, which sometimes is not difficult. It's easy to do. So so you have that side of it. The other side that I mentioned is you have names of your relatives. Now, let's say you go on one of these sites, you find out the officer's name, you find out the officer's spouse, you find out the officer's mother. You go to the mother's site and you can find out her maiden name.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have a common answer to a security question when you set up an online account. So none of this is good. None of this is good that it's open on the internet. You don't need an account to get this information. You don't need to pay any money to get this information. It's all out there. It's all open, and it's dangerous.
Yeah, you're exactly right. One of the POCUA, which produces this show, one of our longest standing partners is Vero, that offers identity theft solutions, especially recovery, through a couple of our police credit unions, the main one being the National Police Credit Union. And we stress to officers and lay people, how important it is to, do some basic things on your end to protect yourself. And kind of like we talked about before, that sixth sense too, just being aware of what's going on. If you see something strange, whether it's from an identity theft standpoint or something on social media or a text or something, if you see something strange, then do something about it. Delete it. Call your credit card company. Look and see exactly who that person is on social media. Something. Don't just ignore it.
Sure. Sure. And those services that provide help after you've been a victim of identity theft are good and helpful, but I'd rather you not be a victim of identity theft to begin
Correct.
with, so that you don't have to go through that hassle, so you don't need their service. It's kind of like, locking your car door and locking the front door of your house so you don't get burglarized. Yeah, the cops will show up and they'll try and find your stuff for you, but it's just better not to be a victim in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I always make sure the car doors are locked every night before I go to bed. Uh, Pete, you've given us so much great information already. But is there possibly one number one tip out there for officers and their families when it comes to officer privacy that you want to share out there with our audience?
Just take it seriously and be proactive.
Hmm.
uh, I mentioned, Googling yourself and doing a vulnerability assessment on yourself, and know what's out there about you. Be educated, be knowledgeable, know what somebody would find out if they were doing research on you. Uh, Google yourself. Is your address available on these sites?
Hmm.
If it is, either, decide, what am I going to do now? Your social media. What am I sharing on my social media? Are they open or are they private? Um, just be aware of it. Don't stick your head in the sand and think, well, it's never going to happen to me. I live in a small town, or I have a desk job, or I'm not, this is never going to happen here, or the community loves me. I'm a school resource officer, or I work with the community. They like me. They don't, I'm not, you know don't have that thinking. Um, the people who are anti-law enforcement in this country, if you wear a badge, you are a target.
Yeah.
And be knowledgeable, be educated, and be proactive.
Yeah, great advice. I don't wear a real badge. I wear one on my shirt for Public Safety Talk Radio, and I think that I'm a target sometimes just because I'm a first responder supporter some days. And for those folks out there, I know a lot of first responders make sure they protect themselves and their family and their homes with firearms and security and ladders and all kinds of things. Make sure that you're using officer privacy or some other service, but officer privacy certainly offers it to protect yourself online as well. Pete, thank you so much for joining me twice, in essence, and being such a good sport. And most of all, giving so much insightful information.
Thank you very much, Ken. I appreciate it.
So, thank you again, and thank you for either watching or listening to this episode of Public Safety Talk Radio, and we will be back with you next week with another great guest. Take care. Stay safe. Public Safety Talk Radio is produced by the POCUA. The POCUA is a consortium of financial institutions serving law enforcement as well as other first responders and public safety professionals. To learn more about our association and to find one of our credit unions or service providers near you, go to www.policecreditunions.com. And always remember, if you aren't working with one of our POCUA credit unions, you're just banking with an institution that just so happens to serve first responders. As a public safety professional, you and your family deserve better. Find a POCUA credit union today.